The Duke of Ashcombe sent his wife to Blackmere with 1 carriage, 2 trunks, and a letter that said the house was hers until she learned gratitude. He did not ride with her. Adela Harrowmere read the letter once as the carriage wheels sank into the fen road, and once again when the driver stopped before a manor whose left wing had no glass in half its windows. Blackmere did not look like punishment at first glance. Punishment usually makes some effort to be grand. This place had given up that particular ambition years ago. The roof sagged over the old chapel corridor. The front steps were green with moss. Water stood in the ruts of the drive, reflecting a November sky the color of pewter. A woman in a brown wool dress waited by the door with a lantern in one hand and no expression at all. The driver climbed down, opened the carriage door, and looked everywhere except at Adela's face.
Is this Blackmere Hall?
The woman with the lantern gave the house a look, as though she too had occasionally wondered. It is what's left of it, Your Grace. That was how Adela Harrowmere, married 9 weeks and banished in the 10th, arrived at the estate her husband had chosen for her repentance.
Thank you for the light.
She stepped down into the mud and held the Duke's letter so tightly that the paper creased across the words he had not written himself, but had been coward enough to sign. The woman at the door dipped a curtsy. Martha Vale, Your Grace, housekeeper, cook, laundress when the roof allows, and occasionally carpenter when it doesn't.
How many staff are there?
Martha looked past her toward the empty drive and said, counting me kindly, 1. Adela looked at the broken windows, the standing water, the black reeds moving beyond the orchard like a crowd whispering at a funeral. She thought, with a calm that frightened her more than tears would have, that Rowan had meant this place to finish what the marriage had started. Humiliation had not finished her in London. Perhaps he believed cold and mildew would do better work. 9 weeks earlier, he had stood beside her in St. George's, Hanover Square, and looked like a man being led to sentencing rather than a bridegroom. The marriage had been arranged by people with very tidy reasons. Her father had a daughter whose dowry had been damaged by bad investments, and a brother whose debts had grown fangs. Rowan Harrowmere had a title, a house, and no heir, and a duchy whose outer edges were beginning to show cracks beneath the gilt. They had met 3 times before the wedding, always in rooms with too many eyes in them. He had been courteous. She had been composed. Everyone had mistaken courtesy and composure for consent. On the morning after the wedding breakfast, Lady Cressida Harrowmere, Rowan's widowed aunt, had taken Adela aside with the smile of a woman handing over a key to a room that was already locked from the outside. Ashcombe House runs by habit, my dear. You'll find it easier not to change what you haven't yet earned the right to understand. Adela had understood the warning. She had not obeyed it. She had been raised in a house where accounts were read aloud because her father trusted numbers more than sons, and she had learned early that a column of figures will confess long before a gentleman does. By the 7th week of marriage, she knew 3 things about Ashcombe House. The staff were being paid late. The Duke's aunt signed more instructions than the Duke did. And a property called Blackmere appeared in the ledgers every quarter as a loss large enough to make even a duchess with 7 weeks' experience sit very still. She asked Rowan about it at breakfast.
What is Blackmere?
His hands stopped above the coffee.
An old holding in Norfolk?
It loses more each quarter than Ashcombe House spends on coal.
Then it is doing so with remarkable consistency.
That was not an answer.
It was the only one worth having before breakfast.
He said it dryly, not cruelly, but he did not look at her again until Lady Cressida entered, and the conversation became furniture, weather, and the sort of silence families mistake for peace because no one has thrown anything yet. Rowan had a reputation before she married him. Society called him cold, careless, a man who had survived his parents' carriage accident at 19 and learned afterward to treat feeling as a creditor that should not be encouraged. Adela had not believed all of it. She had believed the part where he had let other people govern his life because that seemed easier than admitting he had one. 2 weeks after the breakfast conversation, She found the old Blackmere drainage maps in a locked cabinet Lady Cressida had told her held only estate sermons. They were not sermons. They were surveys, leases, rent rolls, and a bundle of letters from tenant farmers begging for repairs to the sluice gate before the wintertide came high enough to drown their lower fields. The last letter was dated 8 months before Adela's wedding. It had never been answered. She took it to Rowan in his study at midnight because the house was quieter then, and because she had begun, wrongly perhaps, to believe the man she had married might be better reached when no one was watching him be a duke.
Your tenants at Blackmere have written 6 times about the sluice.
I know,
Then why has nothing been done?
because Blackmere has consumed money for 20 years and returned rot, fever, and excuses. My father tried to drain it. My grandfather tried to sell it. Every man who has put money into that place has watched the Fen swallow it.
Men have said that about women too, and often with the same evidence.
That made him look up. There was, for the briefest moment, something almost alive in his expression.
You have been Duchess for 9 weeks.
And Blackmere has been failing longer than that, which suggests time in office has not been the solution.
The sentence crossed the desk before she could soften it, and he stood.
Do not mistake access to my ledgers for authority over my judgment.
I would need to see evidence of judgment first.
She regretted that one the moment it left her mouth. It struck him exactly where she had aimed, and she had not known until the arrow flew that she was capable of wanting it to land. The quarrel that followed was quiet enough not to wake the house. Quiet quarrels are not kinder. They simply give each wound better diction. By dawn, Lady Cressida knew of it. By luncheon, her brother knew enough to send a concerned note. By the end of the week, half of London had heard that the new Duchess of Ashcombe had been meddling in estate affairs and distressing her husband with her opinions. Rowan did not defend her, and later she remembered that more sharply than the gossip, the aunt's satisfied stillness, or even the letter he signed 3 days after. The letter said Blackmere required a household presence and that a period of country air might be beneficial to all parties. She remembered that the room had waited for him to say, "My wife asked a reasonable question." And he had looked at his coffee as though it had wronged him personally and said nothing at all. Now the country air smelled of damp plaster, dead leaves, and abandonment. Martha Vale led her inside. The entrance hall had once been handsome in the narrow-shouldered way of old houses built before fashion learned to waste space. A cracked marble table stood under a portrait darkened by smoke. Buckets sat along one wall, catching a leak that spoke at uneven intervals into the silence. Water dripped into the nearest bucket with the patience of something that had been doing so for years. Martha set the lantern down. "Your room is dry, mostly.
Mostly will do for tonight.
There's bread, cheese, and a soup if you don't ask too much of it."
I rarely ask too much of soup.
It was the first almost kind thing said in the house, and it came out tired, but Martha's mouth moved as though it had considered smiling and decided the structure might not hold. Adela ate in the old breakfast room wearing her traveling dress and gloves because the fire had not yet convinced the damp walls to release their cold. At the end of the meal, Martha placed a ring of keys on the table. "These open what still opens."
And what does not?
The estate office. His Grace had it sealed after the steward left 4 years ago. Adela looked toward the dark passage beyond the door.
Then tomorrow we begin there.
Martha did smile then, not warmly, but in the way a woman smiles at a storm cloud when she realizes it is at least moving in the right direction, and told her she would need a crowbar. They found one in the stable the next morning, beside a carriage with a cracked axle and a family of mice in the footwell. The estate office door gave way after 6 blows from Martha and 1 from Adela that nearly cost the Duchess her dignity and did cost her a glove. The room beyond smelled of mildew, ink and papers left too long with no one believing they mattered. Adela stood on the threshold. Ledgers lined one wall, rent rolls. Maps, bundles of correspondence tied in rotting tape. A desk sat beneath the window with its drawers swollen shut. This was not a house without answers. This was a house full of them, and no one had cared to listen. The first week at Blackmere did not improve Adela's opinion of her husband. It improved, inconveniently, her understanding of him. Rowan Harrowmere had inherited a dukedom at 21 with 3 dead family members behind him, 1 aunt at his shoulder, and a father whose papers revealed a talent for delay dressed up as prudence. Blackmere had been neglected long before Rowan had legal authority over it. Neglect, however, is not a ghost. It does not become harmless because the first man who made it is dead. The sluice gate at Mallow Cut had not been repaired in 9 years. The eastern grazing leases had been reduced because 2 fields flooded every spring. 12 cottages paid rent in labor rather than coin because fever had taken either the working man, the milk cow, or both. And still, hidden in the oldest map case, Adela found the thing that made her sit down on the floor with dust on her skirt and the day going cold around her, a proposed rail spur. It was no gentleman's sketch drawn after port and optimism, but a surveyed route from the main line at Wexham Junction to the edge of Blackmere's north bank, where barges could take reeds, peat, wool, and grain downriver if only the bank were sound enough to hold a loading platform. The plan was 12 years old. It had been refused by the Duke's father on the grounds that Blackmere was not worth further involvement. Adela read the sentence 3 times, then laughed once. So sharply Martha looked in from the hall. "Have you found money or madness?"
Possibly both.
The first tenant to come was Gideon Pike from Fen End farm, a man of 60 with a face carved by wind and a hat he held as though uncertain whether duchesses required both hands. He came to ask whether the rumor was true that her grace meant to inspect the sluice herself.
The rumor is cautious. I mean to inspect the sluice, the bank, and every cottage that has written to this house in the last 5 years and received no answer.
Gideon Pike blinked and told her she would want boots.
I have boots.
He looked at the hem of her black walking dress and corrected himself. Different boots. By the end of the second week, Adela owned a pair of men's fen boots purchased from a widow who had not expected to sell anything to a duchess except perhaps eggs. By the end of the third, she could cross the lower path without sinking past the ankle if she chose the reed clumps correctly. By the end of the fourth, the tenants had stopped curtsying every time she entered a yard and had begun, instead, to complain properly, which was progress Lady Cressida would not have recognized. The first real change came because of a child with a cough.
You are building it too close, Rowan.
Ellie Pike,
Adela,
Gideon's granddaughter, was 8 years
No,
old,
you have not
small
told
enough
me.
to be carried
You
and
have
proud
chosen to
enough to
ruin us.
dislike needing it. Fever had gone through Fen End twice in 3 winters, and Martha said it came when the standing water turned sour near the lower cottages. Adela visited with broth, linen, and the village surgeon, who had not been paid by Blackmere in 2 years, and seemed startled when the Duchess counted the coins into his hand before he opened his bag. Ellie lay under a patched quilt, breathing badly. Her mother said, without accusation, the old Duke promised the ditch would be cleared before the last flood. Accusation expects an answer. Weariness has often stopped expecting even that. Adela went back to the hall and wrote 3 letters that evening. One to the drainage engineer whose name appeared in the old rail survey. One to her brother, requesting that he do one useful thing in his life and locate the current directors of the Wexham line. One to her husband. The letter to Rowan was the shortest. Blackmere is not dead. It has been mismanaged. There is a difference. If you meant to punish me with it, you have accidentally handed me work. She sealed it before she could make it kinder. In London, Rowan Harrowmere read that sentence twice in his study while Lady Cressida discussed Christmas guest lists, as though his wife were an inconvenient errand that had been postponed until spring. "Work?" he said under his breath, and Lady Cressida looked up sharply.
Nothing.
But it was not nothing. It was the first word from Adela in a month that did not ask his permission to exist. He should have been relieved by the distance. Blackmere was meant to quiet the gossip, satisfy his aunt, and give everyone time to forget that the Duchess of Ashcombe had entered her husband's ledgers with a mind of her own. Instead, Ashcombe House had become louder in her absence. Not with sound. Sound he could manage. It had become loud with the places she was not. The breakfast chair opposite his, the ledger cabinet she had opened with such offensive competence. The conservatory window where he had once seen her standing in the rain's reflection, reading a tenant's letter with more attention than his own steward had given it in years. He had meant to be angry with her. Anger, like many useful things, had proved difficult to maintain without assistance. Lady Cressida provided assistance regularly, including that evening when she said, "She will tire of mud soon enough. Women of that sort are brave when being observed. The Fens will have no patience for performance." Rowan folded Adela's letter carefully.
What sort is that?
Girls whose fathers encouraged them to mistake arithmetic for character. He looked at his aunt then, properly.
Be careful.
It was the first warning he had given anyone on Adela's behalf. It came too late to be generous, but not too late to be noticed. "If you're still with Adela in that damp old house, tell me this. Is it warm or cold where you are right now? And if the story has earned it, a like helps the platform understand that these slower, quieter romances are worth showing to someone else." The engineer arrived at Blackmere on a Tuesday in a gig that lost a wheel nut on the lower road and arrived in an attitude of professional resentment. Mr. Edwin Salter was thin, sharp-nosed, and unimpressed by titles, which Adela liked before he had finished complaining about the road. He inspected the mallow-cut sluice for 2 hours, came back wet to the knee, and told her the truth without cushioning it. The gate must be rebuilt. Not patched, rebuilt. The north bank wants piling. The east ditch needs clearing, and the old mill channel can be reopened if you enjoy spending money before Christmas.
What happens if we do nothing?
The lower cottages flood before Epiphany if the tide runs high and the wind comes wrong.
And if we do everything?
You may have grazing land by spring, reed beds worth cutting, fewer fevers, and a bank firm enough to interest a railway man with more ambition than sentiment. Adela looked at the black line of water beyond the reeds.
What will it cost?
The figure he gave her made the room feel colder. Martha, who was standing near the kitchen door with a basket of onions, made a sound usually reserved for funerals and badly behaved geese. Adela did not have the money. Blackmere's rents were thin. Her own allowance came through Ashcombe House, which meant through Rowan, which meant through Lady Cressida if the old woman had anything to say about it. Her dowry had been absorbed into the marriage settlement and could not be touched without trustees. What she had was the pearl necklace Rowan had placed around her throat the night of their wedding dinner, while 20 guests watched him perform tenderness with excellent posture. It was worth enough to begin. Selling it would become gossip. Then again, Adela had begun to suspect gossip was a tax woman paid whether they purchased anything or not. She sold the necklace in Norwich through Martha's cousin, a pawnbroker with an honest scale and an expression that suggested he had spent a lifetime deciding which questions not to ask. The first men began work at Mallow Cut 3 days later. Word reached London in less than a week. It reached Lady Cressida first, because irritating news often knows exactly where it will be most appreciated. "She has sold the Harrowmere pearls," Cressida said. Rowan was at his desk, signing estate correspondence he had not read as carefully as he ought.
They were hers.
They were family pearls, Cressida said, and Rowan answered that they had been around Adela's neck, a distinction even the law managed. His aunt's face hardened at the correction. "Do you hear yourself? She humiliates you, takes your jewels to a tradesman, and spends the money digging mud in a property your father had the sense to abandon."
My father had many qualities. Sense about land was not always chief among them.
The sentence surprised them both, though Lady Cressida recovered first. Go to Blackmere, then, if you are so eager to be made a fool in person." He did not answer, and she left him with the neat, hard silence she used when affection had failed and strategy had taken its chair. An hour later, from the upper landing, he heard her ask the footman whether anyone still knew how to reach Mr. Percival Fenlow, the former Blackmere steward. Rowan paused with his hand on the study door. The name meant very little to him then. It would mean rather more before Christmas. The next morning, he ordered a carriage. Adela was standing waist-deep in argument when her husband arrived, and water was close enough to make the phrase nearly literal. She stood near the mallow-cut sluice in a brown borrowed cloak, men's boots, and a bonnet that had surrendered several hours earlier. Mr. Salter had a rolled plan under one arm. Gideon Pike and 6 laborers stood nearby with spades, ropes, and the collective expression of men who know exactly what must be done and are waiting for the person with money to stop being careful. Rowan stepped down from his carriage into mud deep enough to make his polished boot vanish to the ankle, and no one bowed quickly. It was perhaps the first time in his adult life that a room had failed to rearrange itself around his title, because the room was a marsh and had larger concerns.
Your Grace.
Duchess.
It had been 6 weeks since they had stood within arm's reach. She looked thinner, though not weaker. There is a difference. Her face had lost the smooth finish London teaches women to maintain, and gained a steadiness he was not prepared for. She had mud on her hem. It became in that moment the most accusing thing he had ever seen.
I came about the pearls.
They are now a sluice gate.
Gideon Pike coughed once into his glove. Mr. Salter developed a sudden fascination with his plan.
You might have written before selling them.
I did write. You might have answered before the lower cottages flooded.
Those pearls were my mother's.
The words came out before he had decided whether they were accusation or grief. Adela's face changed, but only slightly.
Then I'm sorry they had to become timber. I would have preferred them to remain a gift.
Welcome,
They were a
Lady
gift.
Cressida.
No. They were proof you could fasten something beautiful around my
Thank
throat
you,
in
Lord
public
Beaumont.
and still send me away in private.
That struck harder than the mud, harder than the broken gate, because it was not about money at all. Rowan looked at her then and understood, belatedly, that the pearls had not been the first things sold at Blackmere. His wife's trust had gone earlier, and for less useful terms. A gust came across the water and lifted the edge of her cloak. Rowan looked past her then to the broken timber gate, the black water
You
pressing
stand on
behind
my
it,
land.
the men waiting for wages his house had not
This land
sent.
is ours.
He had
We
expected
will discuss this in
defiance,
private.
not evidence.
How much?
To rebuild properly, more than the pearls. To delay failure until spring, less than your aunt spends on a dinner for people she dislikes.
That was not a diplomatic answer. Blackmere understood that sort of arithmetic. Rowan looked at Mr. Salter and asked if he was the engineer. "When paid, Your Grace," Salter answered.
Then be paid. Rebuild it properly.
Adela turned to him so quickly the mud pulled at one boot.
Do not do that.
Do what?
Arrive, give the order I have spent weeks proving necessary, and expect every man here to understand that sense only becomes official when spoken by a duke.
The silence after that had weather in it. Rowan deserved the sentence. That did not make it comfortable to receive in front of 6 laborers, 1 engineer, and a tenant farmer who had known his family since before Rowan knew how to sign his own name. He took off his gloves slowly.
Then tell them yourself. I will sign the draft.
Adela watched him, searching for a trick, and found none.
Mr. Salter, rebuild the sluice properly. Begin with the north beam before the tide turns. Mr. Pike, hire the extra men we discussed. His Grace will sign the draft before he leaves.
Gideon Pike looked from Duchess to Duke and back again, then said, "Aye, Your Grace," to Adela while Rowan listened without flinching. He nearly spoiled it before supper. The first draft he signed gave Mr. Salter funds for timber and wages, but kept final authority for any additional expense in London, with Rowan's estate office. Adela read the paper in the breakfast room while Rain tapped steadily at the glass.
This map,
No.
though blank now, represents the limitless
No.
potential of our proposed
This makes
railway
me a
extension
messenger
across
with
the
muddy
fens.
boots.
Indeed, the opportunity
It does
is
not let me
significant.
govern anything.
It protects the estate from uncontrolled spending.
It protects you from being seen to trust me.
He folded his hands behind his back.
You have spent money you did not have sold jewels without notice and hired an engineer before asking whether the estate could bear it.
I sold jewels because children were coughing in rooms your estate could have kept dry.
And if every tenant learns that illness is enough to empty the house accounts?
The sentence landed badly, and he knew it as soon as he said it, but knowing a thing after it leaves your mouth does not call it back. Adela's stillness answered before her voice did.
You may return to London, Rowan.
That is not what I meant.
It is close enough to what has governed Blackmere for years.
She walked out before he could answer, taking the unsigned draft with her. He found her an hour later at Fen End, standing in the doorway of Ellie Pike's cottage while the child's mother showed her the damp line on the wall from the last flood. He did not enter at first. He stood outside in the cold and listened to a mother explain how she slept in a chair when the water rose, because if she lay down she might not hear it in time to lift the child. Ledgers could be postponed. That voice could not. By evening, he had rewritten the draft. Full local authority for emergency works. Adela's signature valid up to the agreed limit. Salter paid weekly. Tenant labor entered by name, not estimated in a lump sum where a steward could shave it thin. He placed it on the estate office desk without ceremony.
I was wrong this morning.
You were.
I would like to say I recognized that by moral improvement. In truth, I recognized it because Ellie Pike's mother described the flood line beside her bed.
Moral improvement by geography is still improvement.
She had offered him one small mercy, and he did not waste it by asking for a second. He stayed 3 days because the work had begun, and leaving after signing a draft would have looked exactly like the man she believed he was. He slept in the room across from hers because it was the only room Martha could promise would not leak directly onto his face. He ate soup that asked very little of itself. He walked the lower bank with Salter and learned how little a dry room understands about flooded land. On the second evening, he found Adela in the estate office sorting leases by candlelight, a shawl around her shoulders and ink on the side of her hand.
You should have told me the fever had come from the standing water.
I did.
You wrote it?
Yes. That is one traditional method of telling someone something at a distance.
The corner of his mouth moved, not a smile. A small structural failure in the wall that had been pretending to be his face.
I'm sorry.
She looked up then. Some apologies arrived dressed too grandly, carrying explanations like servants behind them. His did not. It stood in the room bareheaded and knew it had come late.
For which part?
Not defending you, sending you here. Letting my aunt call neglect prudence because it was easier than arguing with the only family I had left.
Adela set down the lease.
That is a great deal of apology for one sentence.
I can make it longer if that improves it.
It would not.
They sat in the quiet after that, the candle between them, rain tapping at the patched window. The lease beside Adela had curled at one corner where damp had found it. Rowan reached for a paperweight, then stopped before crossing her side of the desk.
May I?
Such a small question should not have mattered, yet it changed the air between them. Adela slid the paperweight toward him instead of away. Their fingers touched against the brass edge. Neither of them made a romance of it. Neither of them moved quickly.
You are learning to ask before touching what is mine.
Slowly.
Slowly may do, if it is honest.
The candle guttered once. Rowan lowered his hand first, but not before Adela saw what it cost him to leave the moment unclaimed. That night did not forgive him. It made the house less empty. The storm came on Rowan's 4th day. It began as rain, ordinary and mean, then became wind, then became the sort of weather that changes plans by force. At dusk, Gideon Pike's boy came running up the drive to say the lower bank was giving way near Fen End and Ellie Pike was still at the cottage with her mother. Rowan reached the hall as Adela was already pulling on her cloak.
You're not going down there.
I am exactly going down there.
The road will be underwater.
Then we should leave before it is deeper.
Rowan heard his own voice and disliked how little difference there was, in that instant, between fear and command.
Adela.
If you order me to stay, I will go anyway and resent you for the wasted minute.
Martha from the kitchen doorway said, "The lanterns are by the back door," and that settled it. They went together. The path to Fen End had become a black ribbon of water, shallow in places, treacherous in others. Rowan carried a lantern high. Adela knew where the reed clumps held. Twice she caught his sleeve before he stepped where the mud would have taken him to the knee. The wind took speech and tore it apart. By the time they reached the cottage, the back room had already flooded. Ellie's mother stood on a chair with the child in her arms, the water around her ankles and rising. Rowan went through the window because the door had jammed with a floating bench against it. Dukes seldom looked graceful entering cottages through windows in bad weather. Rowan looked useful, which mattered more. He took Ellie first, wrapped in Adela's cloak. Adela took the child from him through the window and felt the small, fever-warm body press against her chest. Then he lifted the mother through, and finally the ledger box from the shelf, because the woman cried out for it with such desperation that Adela understood the rent receipts were inside. On the way back, the path vanished beneath a rush of water from the broken side ditch. Rowan slipped and the lantern went out. For one terrible second, Adela had only the sound of water and the weight of the child in her arms, and no sight of him at all.
Rowan.
His hand came up out of the dark, gripping a willow root. She could not reach him without setting Ellie down in the water. Gideon Pike reached him first, with a rope and 2 laborers behind him, and the men hauled their Duke out of the ditch like any other soaked, gasping, mud-covered fool who had underestimated the fen. He lay on the bank for 3 breaths, coughing water. Then he looked at Adela and the child in her arms.
Are you hurt?
I'm furious.
That is not the same thing.
It may become so.
He laughed then, not much and not well, but genuinely through water and mud and the shock of having nearly been carried off by his own inheritance.
I have examined
Adela
the details
hated,
carefully, Adela.
very
And what
briefly,
does it mean for
how
our
much
fame?
she wanted to hear it again.
You're right, the estate is undeniable,
The storm changed
Rowan.
Blackmere, and 22 people spent the night in the hall. Tenants, laborers, 2 children, 1 engineer, Martha with every blanket the house possessed, and the Duke of Ashcombe sitting on the floor near the kitchen fire with a bandage around his wrist, taking receipts from men who had not been paid fairly for ditch work under the last steward. At 2 a.m, Adela found him adding columns on the back of an old invitation card because there was no clean paper left.
You should rest.
I have been resting for years. It appears to have been bad for the estate.
She stood beside him, tired enough that the room softened at its edges.
That is the first sensible thing I have heard you say since our wedding.
I did say I do with reasonable clarity.
I have been reconsidering its evidentiary value.
He looked up at her. The firelight made him look younger than London ever had, or perhaps only less rehearsed.
Have you?
The question was quiet. It asked more than the words admitted. Adela thought of the letter that had sent her here. She thought of the pearls. She thought of Ellie Pike's wet hair against her cheek, of Rowan going through a window without once looking back to see if anyone admired him for it.
I am reconsidering many things.
That was all she gave him. It was enough to keep him awake until dawn. Lady Cressida arrived 3 days later with enough contempt to warm a small room if properly harnessed. They found Blackmere in motion. Men were unloading timber near the sluice. Martha was directing 2 village women in the laundry as though she had commanded armies in a previous life and found linen a lesser but respectable theater. Mr. Salter was arguing with a railway surveyor in the drive. and Adela was in the estate office with Rowan, 3 tenant representatives, and a map spread over the desk. Lady Cressida did not knock. "Enough," she said. It was a word that had clearly served her well in other rooms. Blackmere's estate office was not one of them.
Good morning, Lady Cressida.
Lady Cressida turned to Rowan. "Send her home. Not to London, if you are not ready for that, to her father's house. Quietly, before this becomes impossible to repair."
What is this?
"Your name."
My name is doing better work here than it has done in London all year.
Cressida stared at him. It occurred to Adela that his aunt had not expected resistance from him any more than she had expected warmth from the walls. "Ashcombe, your wife was not raised to bargain with laborers in a flooded office."
No, she was raised to read accounts. It is proving useful.
Adela looked at him then, quickly. Some defenses arrive as swords. This one arrived as a man naming her competence in front of the people who had treated it as a social defect. She found, to her embarrassment, that the second kind could be harder to stand under. Lady Cressida's face went still. "You will regret humiliating your family for a wife who has not yet learned loyalty." Rowan's voice changed.
No, I regret humiliating my wife to preserve a family habit of calling neglect loyalty. There is a difference.
And accept Adela
The room
Harrowmere
held
as
its
the
breath.
rightful authority.
Thank you.
The sentence was quiet. It was also late, true, and impossible to unsay. Cressida left Blackmere before luncheon. The railway men came at the end of November. 2 directors, 1 surveyor, and a solicitor whose eyebrows suggested he had been born suspicious and educated further. They expected to meet the Duke of Ashcombe. They met the Duke and Duchess together. Adela presented the old survey first, then Salter's revised bank report, then Gideon Pike's figures for reed cutting, peat cartage, and reclaimed grazing. Rowan presented the capital guarantee, which sounded grander than the money my household should have spent 10 years ago, though that was what it amounted to. The solicitor asked whether the labor supply could be relied upon through winter. Gideon Pike, who had been invited to stand witness and had not expected to speak, said, "Pay men fair and don't drown their cottages, sir, and you'll find we're reliable enough." The surveyor laughed. The solicitor did not, but he wrote something down, which in his profession was practically applause.
My
By
dearest
dusk,
Adela,
they had a provisional agreement. Not a miracle, but terms,
Rowan,
which were better
you
for
honor me.
drainage. That evening, after the directors left, Adela walked to the north bank alone. The reeds had been cut back in places, opening a view she had not seen when she arrived. Water, yes, and mud and distance, but also a line of pale winter sky where the land flattened toward the horizon. Rowan found her there at the edge of the cut reeds.
You should not be out here without a lantern.
You have developed a touching faith in lanterns since falling into a ditch.
I have developed a touching suspicion of ditches.
He came to stand beside her. For a while, neither of them spoke. The fen made its small sounds around them. Water under reeds, a bird lifting somewhere unseen, wind moving over open land.
I thought this place would make you ask to come home.
I know.
That is not the worst of it.
No.
The worst of it is that part of me wanted you to ask so I could pretend I had been right about what you could bear.
She looked at him, and the honesty in his face did not flatter either of them.
I was afraid of you.
Of me?
Of what you saw, how quickly you saw it, the accounts, my aunt, the rooms I had stopped entering in my own life. It is a very uncomfortable thing. Discovering your new wife has met you for 9 weeks and already located the rot.
You could have asked me to help.
I know that now.
Did you know it then?
He considered lying kindly, then decided she deserved better than kindness with a false bottom.
No. Then I only knew that you made me feel judged in every place I had already judged myself and failed to change.
There it was. Not the whole truth, perhaps, but the root of it. She had thought he sent her away because he found her difficult. He had because she had been right in rooms where he had been trying, for years, not to look.
I do not want a husband who
I
is
cannot
never
forgive
ashamed,
myself for
Rowan.
this.
I would not trust such a man.
We will
I
find
want
a way,
one who
Rowan.
does not punish me for noticing when shame is useful.
He closed his eyes briefly. The wind moved between them, cold and clean.
I cannot undo the letter.
No.
I can write another.
Letters appear to be a hazardous medium for you.
He almost smiled at that.
Then I can say it.
She waited without helping him.
Come home when you wish. Stay here if you wish. Govern Blackmere because you have earned the right and because it is better for your hand on it. Not as punishment, not as exile, as yours.
There was one more thing in his face, held back. Adela could have spared him. She did not.
And you?
I would like to be wherever you will still permit me to be useful.
No girl in a novel would have sighed over such a declaration. Adela, inconveniently, had never been less interested in being a girl in a novel. Still, she made him wait a moment. A woman must take her pleasures where history permits them.
You may begin with the East Ditch tomorrow morning,
As a duke,
as a man with boots.
He bowed as gravely as if she had handed him a ministry.
I shall endeavor to deserve both.
The final test came from London, because London dislikes being left out of any ruin it has helped begin. Lady Cressida had not retreated. She had reorganized. In the second week of December, the Morning Post suggested that the Duchess of Ashcombe's residence at an unfit country property had become a matter of family concern. It was a clever paragraph. It never called Adela mad. It merely held the door open for the word and looked away politely. Rowan read it at breakfast. Adela watched his face empty itself.
No.
You don't know what I'm going to say.
You are going to say you should go to London and answer it quietly.
That was one possibility.
It is the wrong one.
He set the paper down.
What is the right one?
We invite them here.
Martha, at the sideboard, whispered something that sounded religious and disapproving.
Not everyone. The railway directors, the county magistrate, your aunt, if she has the courage to come. Let them see what Blackmere is before London explains it to itself.
That is a risk.
So was marrying me, apparently.
Less than I deserve.
She looked at him until he clarified.
The risk, not the marriage.
She laughed despite herself. The paragraph was not the only weapon sent from London. 2 days later, Percival Fenlow arrived at Blackmere in a hired carriage with a solicitor's clerk, a leather case, and the expression of someone who expected the old house to remember him kindly. The house had other ideas. Martha saw him from the kitchen window and said one word, which, though not fit for a drawing room, expressed the full architecture of her opinion. Fenlow had been steward at Blackmere 4 years earlier. The old books said he left for family illness. Martha said he left after selling timber from the West Copse and pocketing half the proceeds. He came now with a claim. In the dining room with Rowan, Adela, Martha, Gideon Pike, and Mr. Salter present, Fenlow laid a document on the table. A lease of work rights over the North Bank, he said, as though announcing a hymn, executed by the late Duke 18 years ago, renewed verbally by His Grace's father, and never lawfully extinguished.
Work rights for what purpose?
Timber, reed, peat, access, and any improvement attached thereto. Mr. Salter made a small sound. It was the engineering version of swearing. If true, the lease would not give Fenlow the rail spur. It would give him standing to delay it, frighten the railway directors, and make Blackmere look exactly as unstable as Lady Cressida wished London to believe it was.
I have never seen this document.
Fenlow answered with a slight bow. Neglected papers often surprise neglected houses, Your Grace. Adela watched Rowan receive the wound and not bleed where anyone could see. Then she looked at the lease. The paper was old. The ink was old enough. the signatures might have satisfied a man who wanted the room to finish quickly. Adela did not.
May I?
Fenlo hesitated, but Rowan did not.
Her Grace manages Blackmere. If the document concerns Blackmere, it concerns her first.
Fenlo's mouth tightened at the word first, giving Adela one useful answer before she had asked a question. Adela read the lease twice, turned it toward the window, and asked Martha for the old rent chest. Fenlo's patience became less elegant by the minute. In the chest were receipts from the same year, chapel repair notes, a butcher's account, and 3 letters from the late Duke in his unmistakable hand. The lease's signature was good, the seal was not. Adela set 2 documents side by side.
The late Duke used the stag seal until 1856. This lease is dated 1854 and bears the heron. That seal did not exist for 2 more years.
Fenlo found nothing safe to say.
Also, your witness is Thomas Braid. He died in January of that year. His widow paid 3/4 rent in poultry, and the entry is in the kitchen book.
Martha folded her arms and said, 4 hens and a mean rooster. I remember him. The solicitor's clerk stepped slightly away from Fenlo. The movement was small enough to deny and large enough to matter.
Mr. Fenlo, you may leave my wife's estate before I decide whether to involve the magistrate before or after luncheon.
Fenlo gathered the document with less care than he had laid it down. At the door, he turned back. You will regret letting a woman make enemies over land, Your Grace. Rowan looked at Adela then, not at Fenlo.
My wife appears to make enemies more accurately than I made friends.
Gideon Pike grinned outright. Fenlo left Blackmere with his forged lease, his hired clerk, and rather less confidence than he had arrived with. By morning, the story had reached Wexham Junction. By the day after that, the railway solicitor sent a note saying he would attend the inspection luncheon after all. A sluice could be repaired with timber and iron. A reputation, apparently, required evidence. They held the inspection luncheon 6 days before Christmas. Calling it a luncheon was generous. It was bread, ham, pickled onions, hot tea, and accounts laid out on the dining table like weapons. The railway directors came. The magistrate came because he had enjoyed the society paragraph less than Lady Cressida had hoped. Lady Cressida came in black silk, as if attending the funeral of everyone else's judgment. Adela showed them the repaired sluice first. Then she showed them the cleared ditch and Fen End cottage, dry at the threshold after 3 days of rain. Ellie Pike, who had recovered enough to be outdoors in a red scarf, gave the Duchess a reed doll she had made with one crooked arm and an expression of considerable authority. Adela accepted it with more solemnity than she had accepted most wedding gifts. At the North Bank, Mr. Salter explained the rail spur while the directors nodded in the manner of men trying not to appear impressed too quickly in case it became expensive. Finally, in the old dining room, Rowan stood before the gathered company and did what he had failed to do in London.
My wife was sent to Blackmere under circumstances I allowed others to call restorative. That was false. She was sent here because she saw neglect I had permitted, and I was too proud and too afraid to thank her for it.
Lady Cressida went very still.
In 7 weeks, Her Grace has done more for this estate than my house has done in 7 years. The new works at Blackmere will proceed under her direction. Any person suggesting she is unfit for the responsibility may bring their figures to this table and be corrected by the same woman they have underestimated.
The sentence returned Adela to herself in front of the same class of people who had first watched her diminished. Adela stood beside him and felt, for the first time since her wedding, that the title around her shoulders did not belong to everyone else more than it belonged to her. Lady Cressida left before tea. This time, no one tried to stop her. That evening, snow began lightly, just enough to soften the broken edges of the old drive and quiet the reeds beyond the orchard. Adela found Rowan in the estate office, looking at the letter he had sent her 7 weeks before. She knew the banishment letter by the fold.
I wondered where that had gone.
Martha gave it to me. She said if I intended to become a better man, I should keep an inventory of the evidence against me.
Adela sat across from him.
Martha has a gift.
Martha terrifies me.
Sensible.
He looked at the paper one last time, then placed it on the fire. It caught slowly at the edge, curled inward, and became unreadable before it became ash.
I loved you badly at first.
Adela's breath caught, though the sentence was spoken quietly.
I do not say that to excuse it, only because I think it was love, even then, twisted into cowardice. You frightened me because I wanted your good opinion before I had done anything to earn it, so I punished you for withholding what I had not deserved.
She looked at the fire. Outside the office, the house was not silent now. Martha moved somewhere down the hall. Men laughed in the kitchen over wages paid before Christmas. Wind touched the window without finding its way through the new putty.
I hated you for sending me here.
I know.
I hated the pearls more.
He looked at her then.
Not because they were ugly. They were not. Because everyone saw you clasp them on me and believed it meant I had been chosen kindly. I wore them like a witness giving false testimony.
I should have noticed.
You should have meant them.
He absorbed that without defense.
I did mean them, I simply did not yet know how little meaning survives when it is not protected afterward.
Then I hated you less for coming.
That was generous of you.
It was inconvenient of me.
He smiled properly then, and the room changed with it. She had seen it only in pieces before. A corner of mouth, a brief failure of restraint, a laugh nearly drowned by storm water. This was the whole thing, and it changed his face so entirely she understood, with some irritation, that she would have been in terrible danger had he done it in London.
Do not look pleased with yourself. You are still on probation.
What are the terms?
Honesty, useful boots, no letters of banishment. And if your aunt wishes to govern something, buy her a chessboard.
Severe, but fair.
He rose and came around the desk, not quickly, not assuming the right. The pause between them held all the rooms they had crossed to get here. The London study, the carriage, the marsh road, the flooded cottage, the public table, where he had finally said what needed saying while it could still matter.
May I kiss my wife?
Adela considered making him wait longer. A woman must not become predictable merely because she is moved. But the snow was beginning at Blackmere. The sluice held. The cottages were dry, and the man before her had learned at least one useful thing about asking.
You may.
He kissed her as though gratitude had become a language at last. The kiss was not the polished courtesy of the wedding breakfast, not possession, and not apology alone. It was an imperfect but conscious promise, made by a man who had discovered that love was not being admired in a dry room. Love was going into the weather when the person you had wronged was already there. By spring, Blackmere's first reclaimed field showed green. The rail spur was approved in March, begun in May, and argued over with such vigor that Martha said prosperity appeared to be noisier than neglect. Fen End stayed dry through the thaw. Ellie Pike's cough did not return. Adela returned to London in April because Parliament had made the season unavoidable, and because she had 3 railway directors to unsettle over dinner. Society watched her enter Ashcombe House on Rowan's arm and waited to see whether exile had humbled her. It had taught her which boots to wear. The Duchess of Ashcombe became, over the next years, a woman people described with caution before they described her with admiration, which is often the order in which the world learns to respect a woman it first meant to dismiss. Rowan became a better duke in the only way that matters, by asking better questions before signing his name. Blackmere never became beautiful in the easy sense. It remained low, wet, stubborn, and frequently inconvenient. Adela loved it for that. Rowan did too, though he maintained for the dignity of the title that his affection was primarily strategic. Martha said nothing about that, but sometimes left his fen boots warming by the kitchen fire when he was due from London, which was how Blackmere said welcome home to anyone it had decided to keep. I knew a woman once named Beatrice Vale. Beatrice, yes, that was her name. Her husband sent her to manage a failing shop for 1 month because he thought the work would prove she was wrong about him needing help. She made the shop profitable, naturally, but that was not the part she remembered with satisfaction. What she remembered was the day he walked in, took off his hat, and asked where she wanted the new shelves. Have you ever been sent somewhere as a punishment, only to discover it was the first place that let you become yourself? If you have, I would like to hear about it in the comments.